Hi everyone. Welcome to DevFest Caribbean, DevFest Caribbean 2020. We have an interesting set of sessions for you all today. But before I get into this, someone I would like to introduce you to, Akira from Google.
Hey, thanks, Nicholas. So, hi, I'm Rodrigo Akira, but you can call me Akira. I'm the developer ecosystem regional lead for Latin America, joining from my home in São Paulo, Brazil. I'd like to start by giving a warm welcome to all of you and thank you for attending this important event. This year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we won't be able to celebrate this important event in person, but I hope you can have an awesome experience on this online event. Developers are very important for us at Google, not only because our company was built by developers, but also because you are responsible for building an entire ecosystem based on our technologies, from Android to web technologies, TensorFlow, and GCP. And I can say that if it wasn't for you, our company would not have the size and reach it has across the globe. DevFest Caribbean is one of the hundreds of DevFests happening at this time all over the world. We already finished our day one for that fest in the Asian events, and we are kicking off the America event series. So I would like to invite you to lift the DevFest momentum as we have more than 72 hours of uninterrupted technology content across the globe. I would like also to highlight the hard work done by the DevFest Caribbean organization. I have only one word to define all the efforts done by you voluntarily, and this word is love. This is the only word that I could find to describe, why you do this, and it is love. And on behalf of Google, I just want to say thank you for all of you that worked really hard on this event. Now it's time to start the event so you can enjoy all the content prepared from the speakers from our community. And once again, on behalf of Google, I'd like to thank you all for participating and for your enthusiasm for Google technologies. So let's get started.
All right, thanks a lot for those words, Akira. So I'm going to talk about some of the sessions we have today. Our first session is by Obika, and it's open source during COVID-19, a lesson about the Caribbean virus tracker. After that, he's followed by Janiqua, who also has a COVID-related talk, right? And she'll be talking about making Caribbean focus information more accessible. After Janika, Janika events would be 2:45 p.m. This is GMT minus 400. Okay. After that, at 3:15 p.m., we have Erwin Williams. So this talk on agents of teams. And ending off the day at 4 o'clock is Lisa Lane with her talk on leveling up from IC data engineer to data manager. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Obika. Are you there?
Hi, afternoon, Nicholas. You hearing me?
Oh, it's really soft.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Let's see. I'll switch over. You hearing me now?
Yes, coming in better.
All right. Afternoon, everyone.
Hey, how you doing?
No. Yeah, I guess we could start the pre-record.
Well, can you just first tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Name is Obika Jelno. I am a cybersecurity consultant by profession. What that means is basically I look at the security of various systems as well as where data is the protection of information anywhere that data is stored, transmitted, or processed. So I work with a lot of businesses in and around the Caribbean. But at the same time, I do have a background in software development as well as forensics.
Oh, that's great. So can you tell us a bit on what kind of motivated this session, this project, I should say?
I guess really and truly, this project was something that I saw that was needed at the point in time. But I think I wanted to kind of discuss my story around it today in terms of what it was about, what were the motivations, how I went about it, what challenges I saw with the project, and so on. I don't want to go too much into it. I would
Great.
prefer to, yeah, let the presentation speak to itself. But yeah, I think this talk today is just more or less a journey concerning an open source project from start to, well, it still isn't finished, but it's currently ongoing. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're about to start the recording here. Remember, attendees, we'll have a short Q&A session after, so you can ask your questions in the chat. I know that we're streaming to multiple destinations, so depending from where you're streaming from, chat may not be enabled. But if you go back to the event platform, you may find other links that will get you that chat. Okay, so let's go.
Morning, everyone. My name is Obika Jeleno. Today I'll be speaking to you about open source during COVID-19, a lesson about the Caribbean virus tracker. I'd just like to start by saying thanks again to GDG for inviting me to present and start or more or less kick off the entire presentation for the third year in a row. This particular year, I wanted to kind of go through something that is a little bit more interesting, probably to the other coding projects that you probably recognized or been familiar with, right? This one is in relation to a open source project that I created during the COVID-19 pandemic to kind of track the statistics at the island level in terms of infections, deaths, and recovery. And today, I'd just like to talk quickly about the development of the project, as well as the challenges that I met with during the development and what I'm currently going through with this project as well today. So just quickly to go through the agenda for this presentation today, we'll just be talking about what is Caribbean Virus Tracker, the development of the site, challenges with the project, the enhanced Caribbean Virus Tracker, tips and recommendations, and we'll just be doing a quick demo of the test site, right? Just so that everybody is kind of familiar with what was done. So what is Caribbean Virus Tracker? Well, simply put, if you go to this web link here, you can see what Caribbean Virus Tracker is. But to give you a bit more detail, the virus tracker was developed to track the novel coronavirus infection statistics in the Caribbean region. So the tracker does all Caribbean islands. It doesn't do a section of the Caribbean, it goes through all the islands. So that includes territories as well as independent countries. It sources the information from reputable organizations. So it was developed to source information from WHO, Johns Hopkins, CDC, so on and so forth. It operates as a filter or aggregator. So in other words, it takes those sources and filters them and just puts them within the scope within the Caribbean. So you will not see any statistics outside of the Caribbean. Everything will be within the Caribbean at an island level. Also, it's an open source project and it's hosted on GitHub, which I will show the link to later down in the presentation. So let's quickly talk about the development of the site. So if you go to this next web link that you see here, you can actually see the original project, right? The original project, in development of that original project, I kind of wrote down what were the initial requirements. Now, these were actually the 6 initial requirements that I wrote down, probably not in this same order, but I remember putting this on pen to paper before I actually started any sort of coding. So the first one being daily record of confirmed cases, deaths, and recovered cases for COVID-19. The focus was on all countries and territories within the Caribbean region. It must be a website that is easily accessible, so it must be available to any and everyone. The website was also to show charts and graphs to allow for comparison of data. And there must be a frequently asked questions section and other information to, to provide people on COVID-19 related information to visitors of the site. And last but not least, the project must be open source. So this was the initial tech stack that was used to build the first site, or the first iteration of the site. It used Gatsby. Gatsby is a static site generator that is built on the React framework, the React JavaScript framework. Then using that static site, it was then put onto Netleafy hosting, which hosted the site for, I think it was over 3 months. I had it hosted there before I moved it to another location, but we'll get to that later on in the presentation. The code is hosted on GitHub. Also, as part of that tech stack, Highcharts and Leaflet. Highcharts was used to generate it's a JavaScript framework for generation of charts, graphs, and so on. Leaflet was used to generate the map. It's actually it's being used for the next version of the site. So you can actually see the various cases and so on. Microsoft Excel was also used because the initial version of the site used a spreadsheet, and then Python scripts were used for data extraction. So this is just an overview of the workflow, the development workflow. Sources that were used were the WHO situation reports and the Johns Hopkins GitHub repo. It's actually a repository on GitHub that does daily reports of the entire world, and it aggregates it from the various CDC resources throughout the world, from any region within the world, and it puts it on GitHub. I'm still using that GitHub repo to this day to actually get my statistics, and I'm using Carper as a checkback just to make sure that it's more or less similar to what is being documented in the Caribbean region. So just to give you an overview of how the initial workflow went, after the data was extracted from the various sources, it was put into a CSV file. The CSV file was then pushed into the GitHub repo with the code for the static site. And then Netleafy would pull from the GitHub repo, build the site, and then host it on its platform. So it's a very simple workflow, but it did have its complications, and we'll talk about it in a while. So let's talk about the challenges with the project. So before I talk about the challenges, I'd just like to show this, very simple quote. Before software can be reusable, it first needs to be usable. This is a quote by Ralph Johnson. He is the co-author for Design Patterns, Elements of Reusable Object-Oriented Programs. What he was saying is that basically when you are developing software, and if you want it to be reusable or usable by other persons, you need to ensure that it meets certain requirements to be used by those other persons. And there were several difficulties in the first iteration that if somebody was then to take that project and then use it in another way, it would make it very difficult. So what do I mean by that? Well, the first challenge was that data entry was very manual for the first iteration of the set. It required running of Python scripts, editing a CSV file, ensuring that everything added up in the CSV file, sorting it, and there were a lot of manual steps, and then you had to push it to the repo, and then it's only when it's pushed to the repo, then everything is then built and uploaded into the web. That's not a very usable way of entering information into a website. It's probably better if you have a GUI or some sort of workflow in the back end of the site. Another project challenge was that the statistics was calculated at an island level. And what I mean by island level, I couldn't get anything at a parish or a state level. So you could probably see the cases for the particular island, but if you wanted to see the individual cases or the distribution throughout the island, I couldn't get that. There are ways of getting it now, but that was another difficulty in terms of being able to not only get it, but as well as record it within the first iteration of the site. The next project challenge was that the site was heavily dependent on a CSV spreadsheet. So there was a lot of repeatable information. I'm going to talk about database normalization and all and the importance of it, but you get what I mean by using a spreadsheet to store all your data. There were a lot of clashes with the Node modules and the Gatsby plugins. I'm not a JavaScript developer. This was my first time with it, but I found a lot of difficulties with the Node modules and Gatsby. At one point, it actually broke the search engine optimization because of those clashes. And then the last project challenge that I had with this particular web app was that it was only specific to COVID-19 because it was a static site. It was specific to COVID-19. There was no, at the point in time, I didn't really think anything beyond that. So if somebody was to then take that static site and try and use it for another pandemic, it would require a lot of change to the code base in order to get that done. So let's talk about the enhanced Caribbean virus tracker. So this is actually the newer version of the site. So the newer version of the site actually runs on Python this time. It's used the Django framework, the Django web framework, and it's hosted on a VPS. If you want to see the package, the Django package that was used to develop the newer site, it's actually at a different GitHub repo. This one says Caribbean Outbreak Tracker, right? The project is how I uploaded the project, I think Monday, if I remember correctly. And the code is there, but I have some further enhancements to do to it. But for now, you can at least access the models that were built into the actual Python code. These are just some of the advantages of moving it across to Python as opposed to keeping it as a static site. It's no longer COVID-19 only site. So by that, I mean that it's you can use it for other pandemics that happen thereafter. Hopefully it does not happen, but it's available for that purpose. It's now a database-driven architecture as opposed to just a spreadsheet. Also, it has less dependencies than the previous site. What I found was that when you are installing NPM packages, it's a ton load of dependencies. And if one dependency is out of date or doesn't work properly, it can actually break the entire site. So with this new site, it's less dependencies and it's a lot easier to manage and it's very unlikely to break. Django apps can be packaged. Well, if you are a Python developer, you know about PyPI. So I'll speak about that a little bit later. And also the advantage of this site is that it also opens up the capability for machine learning and data science packages. So in other words, once you have this site and you install it, you can then use Python to then run any particular models or machine learning models or data science models or even charting and all. So those are some of the advantages that this particular version of the site has over the previous version. So if you want to see or at least use this version of the site, it's available via pip. So if you run pip install Caribbean outbreak tracker, it should install to your virtual environment or to your Python package dependencies. You need to have Python 3.6 so in order to use it. So that's one of the requirements, but it's available. You just run pip install, it installs, and then you can go onto the documentation, and through the documentation, you can then see how to go about accessing the models and so on and so forth. You can also go to the web link below, the Python package, the pypi.org. It's hosted there as well, so you can get the latest version. You could also see the documentation, and so on and so forth. So just some of the future improvements. Like I said, for now you can access the models. However, I'm hoping to eventually have template tags put in some view mixins. If you're a Django developer, you probably understand what those terminologies means, but basically template tags and view mixins allow you to display the data. Right now, you can just access the data through the models, but displaying is still not available in the Python package, but I hopefully we'll get that done in due course. I'm also hoping to get state and parish level recording of the statistics into that particular package. I'm working on that right now at the moment. API integration is also being developed at the moment. I do also want to get back into static site generation. I want to be able to, after you build out, you use the package to build out a site, you have the capability to generate a static site and then push that to a static host provider as well. So I'll be looking at that in the future, because the good thing about the static sites is that it's a lot easier to manage. You don't need to do a lot of configuration on your web servers and so on, and there are a lot of free hosting. So that's one reason why I want to try and see how best I could kind of go back to a static site as part of this Python package. And then I'm also improving the documentation in several ways. And one of the ways I'm looking at is deployment options. So through static sites, through Dockerization, through any other hosting platform, including Heroku and so on and so forth. So just to kind of quickly go over some tips and recommendations from at least my learning experiences through this entire open source project. So the first, I guess, tip that I would give to anybody who's starting out a new open source project is don't wait on others to start your project. Start it right away. Do what I did, write down those initial requirements, talk it through, look at it, what's the term, measure twice before you cut. Yeah. Take your time, don't wait on others, just get it into a GitHub repo and start building it. Also always be open to feedback. And now I say open to feedback, not listen. Not all feedback is good. And I should also say not all feedback is relevant to your project as well. So always be open to feedback, listen to what people have to say, and you can then accept the feedback, or you may want to reject that feedback. At the end of the day, as long as you're the author, you take ownership. So therefore, you can decide whether or not a feature or something needs to be integrated into your project. So, but at the same time, always try and take the time to listen and be open to someone's feedback. Social media is extremely important. One of the things that I have learned in producing this site is that your site doesn't get anywhere unless there's some sort of social media page. It's extremely difficult to promote your site without social media. So if you are making a site like this, or you're going to have your own website, you're going to have to create those social media pages, and you're going to have to probably spend time pushing content to social media to get your website promoted. So keep that in mind when you're building an open source project and site as well. Use a language that can meet your project's requirements. So I'm not to say anything was bad with the first iteration of the site. I would just say is that probably now coming into React and the whole NPM node package manager environment, it was a bit difficult. I mean, I know JavaScript, but I'm not a proficient JavaScript programmer, and I met into a lot of difficulties, especially with those dependency issues. At certain points, the code became very bulky, at least in my experience. So if you are going to do an open source project, try to stick to something that you're familiar with. I'm more familiar with Java and Python. So now that I moved to the Python version of the site, I find that I'm coding faster, and a lot of my code is a lot more efficient. And I think that's also based on experience as well. And last but not least, and extremely important, when you're doing an open source project, always document, always create tests. Unfortunately, I don't have tests on the current version, on the Python version of the Caribbean virus tracker right now, but I am developing tests so that if persons contribute, what the advantage of the tests have on an open source project is that it actually cuts down your review time. So if somebody does a pull request, you don't have to sit down and go through several files and try and read off the code and see whether or not that person, with the feature that person added, it doesn't really break your site. If there are tests involved in it, once you have a CI platform like Jenkins or Travis, run the tests. As soon as the person does that pull request and the tests are run and you see it passing, you can just do a quick review and you can then accept the pull request. That's the advantage that tests have. I would always encourage people to create tests for any package that they're releasing as open source. It cuts down your review time and it makes it a lot easier to accept those pull requests. As well as the documentation. Documentation also helps persons understand how to use your package or your open source project. So I'll just quickly go over a test version of the site. So just give me 1 second to come out of screen here. And I'm just going to run it here quickly. System probably running a bit slow. It'll start running in a while. Just give it a second. It's probably because I'm recording this session. So here we go. Right. Right. Yeah, it's running a bit slow because my screen is being recorded at the same time. But so this is just a test version of the site. It's taking its time to load, but basically this is more or less the new version of the site. As you could see, the data is a bit off because I'm using test data, but as you can see, the front page more or less lists everything. All 33 countries and territories within the Caribbean. You have a dashboard now, and you have a fact, and if you hit the follow us, you can get links to the Facebook page, Instagram page, Telegram, and well, the old GitHub repo as well. Right. Just to kind of quickly show you the dashboard. Hopefully it loads up quick enough. Right. So this is more or less a new dashboard. It breaks down everything in terms of highest number of cases, highest number of deaths, lowest cases, lowest incidence rate, so on and so forth. This is the leaflet map that is available as well. So you could see from the various countries what is there. There's also, as part of the dashboard, you could get to see the various graphs, breakdown. I have more graphs to add, but at this point in time, I just only have like about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, right? You can also see if you look at, if you click the learn more here, when you click on a country here, it actually takes you to the individual page for a particular island. So you just pull in the Puerto Rico statistics here, right? So this is Puerto Rico. As you can see, they have a steady, as you can see, they have a steady cases here. And you could also see all the cases in terms of new cases, total deaths, recovered, so on and so forth. Also, if you sit down and click on the 3 dashes here, if it actually loads up, right, you could see, you could view in full screen, you could print the chart, you could actually download as a PNG, JPEG, PDF, or SVG. So let's quickly go into the admin site. So this site also, this site uses Django's admin portal. If you're a Django developer, you would know that Django comes with its own admin portal that you can add all your models to. And you can access basically any sort of backend functions without having to build your own admin site. That's one of the advantages that Django, I guess, has over most frameworks. So on the tracker here, these are the four available models that you could sit down and you can modify. If you go to demographics, so for demographics, more or less you can see country, latitude, longitude, parent country. Parent country is more or less as you know, most territories are connected to either United Kingdom, Netherlands, or France, or the US. So that's more or less what parent country is. And if you click on an individual country, you can actually see what is recorded for each individual country. Ooh, this is moving pretty slow. Right, so on the country, you more or less have the country name, parent country, and then you have the relevant data. So you have the area, population size, longitude, latitude, so on and so forth. And that more or less covers demographics. Diseases covers all the diseases or all the pandemic diseases are recorded under this particular model. I'm not really going to go into that because I don't want to kind of run out of time here. So just quickly go into tracker logs just to show you what tracker logs is. Tracker logs more or less stores the statistical information for each individual island per disease as well, right? So as you can see here, it's a pretty big table, more or less, or a pretty big database table. You can see it has for all the islands. Oh yeah, and you have the capability when you actually save a log, it's set to not publish, but in the action section you can actually publish the tracker logs. How the system works is that it will not show any tracker logs that are not published. So you have to enter it first and then publish it in order for it to show on the site. So let me just show at least one tracker log that we have here. Right, so this is what the UI looks for the tracker log. You select a disease. This case is the novel coronavirus. The country, the date of the more or less the date in which you collected this record, and the total amount of cases, total deaths, total recovered. The source, well, in this case, it's Johns Hopkins, and the source URL as well. And that more or less covers the administration site. Let me just quickly go back here. So just to wrap up, I do have social media pages for this site as well as the actual virus tracker itself. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, as well as Telegram. Unfortunately, I'm not on Twitter because I think it's very difficult to get exposure on Twitter. I don't see a lot of people on Twitter, but I know a lot of I know there are a lot of people on Facebook and Instagram. So if you check Facebook and Instagram under those two usernames, you can see those pages, and I try and update them as best as possible. If you want a lot more updates, you can go on the Telegram. The Telegram is a Telegram chat room. Links are available on the site for each individual page. On the Telegram, it automatically sends update every hour, and it's a random update in terms of a chart, a graph, statistics, so on and so forth. So, like I said, I would like to thank GDG and its organizers for inviting me again and making me the lead presenter for this year again, for a third year again. And always, we are still in our pandemic, so wear a face mask, keep to social distancing guidelines, that's 6 feet apart, and always wash or sanitize your hands. If you can, wash your hands. If the water is available, sanitize it. You don't need to do both, right? But just make sure to keep your hands clean as possible and try to avoid touching your face as well. And that's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Okay, so I know there's a little delay, so we will wait a couple of minutes for those questions. But I guess I could give a question to Bika. Bika, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So that's really interesting how you started with one stack, and I think that's a really vast jump from version 1 to version 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is.
So what do you think is the biggest motivator for that jump? I know you kind of mentioned it.
So I think the biggest motivator was really being comfortable with the language. Yes, I know and I understand JavaScript, and I'm a bit familiar with the Node environment, but I think because it was a bit difficult to navigate that environment, it became a bit complex, and I found it at times I would like patch code, and also like if I ran an update on some of the modules ended up breaking other modules. So that whole dependency syndrome in that whole NP Node Package Manager caused a lot of issues with the initial site, and another thing that made me do the jump as well was, you see those machine learning and statistical packages, you don't really find that in Node. Node is more, it's good for building websites, but when it comes to data analysis, you find it more with Java and Python and probably R, as opposed to Node.js. So that was another reason why there was a jump across to the Python language, because it gives people who use the Python package an opportunity to implement machine learning.
Yeah, for sure. The Python language, the ML stuff is really, that's where it's where it's at. So I think that was a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that video, we had a little extra time in the video, so it's just about time for Janiqua's session. But are there any questions from the chat? We give it another minute. Okay. All right, so thanks very much, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for kicking off our event yet another year again. Well, just to give more context, remember this is the Caribbean DevFest, so this is like the first ever Caribbean DevFest in this form, but from the Trinidad chapter is GDG Port of Spain, and it's somewhat of a tradition that we have because the first speaker, as long as he submits.
Thanks again for inviting me. This year was a bit unusual. Hopefully, if I'm able to come back again next year, I'll have something probably a bit more security wise.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Avika.
All right, then take care.
Yeah, yeah. And here is Shaniqua.
Hey,
Hey,
hi.
how you doing?
Hi, Nicholas. I'm doing well. I'm coming to you from Brussels, hence why I'm dressed like this. But I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines originally.
Uh, awesome. Actually, I guess this is the first time we're actually talking in person.
Yes. It's nice to
Okay, so
put a face to the emails.
yes, yes, likewise. Can you give us some context or an introduction?
Yeah,
Yourself?
sure. So, hi everyone. Hope you're enjoying DevFest so far. Really, really interesting presentation already by Obiko. I have somewhat of a similar project, although there are some differences, but you will see more in the presentation itself. And more about me, I'm Janika John. I'm from St. Vincent and Grenadines, as I said before, but I'm currently living in Brussels. I work here full time as a front end engineer at a company called Mediagenics, getting into React, Redux, these types of things. I really love software engineering. It's really my passion. But I also love community building, and I'm really happy to be here as part of this community. But I'm also the founder of Women in Tech Caribbean. So hi to all those members who are watching as well. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
Great. So without further ado, we're gonna go right into your presentation. Okay, so let's have this on.
John, and I'm from St. Vincent and Grenadines, and I'm here to present Carry COVID map and making Caribbean information, focus information more accessible. Before I jump in, I just want to say huge thank you to the Women Tech Makers Trinidad and Tobago team, as well as GDG for this opportunity. So, just a quick overview of my presentation. I'm going to do a walkthrough of the project itself, the technical stack, advantages and disadvantages of the stack, a little bit about open source, and then open the floor for QA. So for the feature walkthrough, I'm going to actually quickly exit the presentation and go to the actual map. So this is the first thing that you see when you visit the carrycovidmap.com right here. And you can see a number of red dots. What do these dots represent? They're actually the confirmed cases in various Caribbean countries, and the map is interactive. So, for example, we could click here, go to Barbados, and you could see a pop-up of all the information relating to Barbados, active cases, confirmed cases, etc. And on the right hand side, we also have a dashboard with quick at a glance information that might be relevant, such as the last time that it was updated, also the lowest active cases in the region, some of the countries with the lowest active cases, and also, unfortunately, the countries which have the highest active cases. Aside from this, so this is the main page. We also have the case graphs page. And this is interesting because you could see kind of at a glance, once again, how cases of COVID actually evolved, or how the case evolution went in various Caribbean countries. For example, if we look at Jamaica, we could see that around the 4th of May, Jamaica had a lower peak, which was then dwarfed by this much larger peak that happened in September. And you could also see kind of how the active cases have evolved. For example, if we look at Trinidad and Tobago, we could see that they never really had such a peak early on in the situation, but then you can see as well that there was this kind of explosion of cases and how things went. So that's a basic overview of the map and what you can see, various features that you could see on the map. So how did this project actually come about? I was actually contacted by a journalist. He DM'd me on Twitter and he said that at the time, Johns Hopkins was one of the few people who were kind of disseminating COVID information, and they had a very famous map. Um, and the journalist actually sent me a comma separated value file that Johns Hopkins had hosted on their GitHub with the same information. And the reason why he sent it to me is because he said that they would actually visit the map as journalists and actually pick out and count the cases for the relevant Caribbean countries that they want and add that up manually every time. And so he was thinking, there must be an easier way. Is there some way using this comma separated value file or CSV file? How can we, see at a glance information that's relevant to us in the Caribbean? Is this possible? And I looked at the way that the data was structured and I realized it's definitely possible. Ended up spending about 4 or so hours building what was just supposed to be a proof of concept to show that, this is something that can be done. Several months later, here we are, still in pandemic situation, and I've done some iterative improvements with this map. So now I'm going to dive into the technical stack. I know you're probably wondering a lot about the technical stack. And the kind of secret with COVID map is that it's very front end heavy. It's essentially a front end on Johns Hopkins data. And I'm going to touch a little bit on the advantages and disadvantages of this setup. But yes, here we are. So on the front end, we have React, which is a very popular JavaScript library right now for building front end applications. I initialized the original proof of concept, which is now the code base, with Create React App, and for the map and the pop-ups and so forth, we use the Mapbox API. And then I have here as my backend the Johns Hopkins CSV file and also an override CSV file. Now, why an override CSV file? At the time earlier on, let's say about March 2020, the day-to-day case situations were a lot more important, or sometimes in some cases, hour to hour, people really wanted to know, oh, Barbados has 10 cases, oh, now they have 15 cases. And so this was happening a lot faster than the once per day updates on the Johns Hopkins CSV file. I really wanted a way to update the information in a timely manner. And so I also hosted my own CSV file with a similar format on my GitHub page, in which we were able to override this information and update it as we saw fit. Another thing is that Johns Hopkins, for at least one Caribbean country, had the wrong latitude and longitude. And so I wanted to be able to correct some of their data as well, because they didn't really have, in some cases, the most accurate data for the Caribbean, which is why it's so important for us to build our own things focused on us. In terms of the deployment, it's done automatically from via Netlify. Once code is pushed to the main track, or well, no, the master track on GitHub, it is deployed. And another really nice thing that I like, especially since the map is open source, if someone opens a pull request, Netlify also automatically makes a deploy preview of this pull request, and I'm able to quickly see, what effect this code will have on the website, what it would look like, quickly check if it will break, etc. So that's very useful. Now code snippets, I pulled out just a few pieces of code that I thought might be interested, especially if you're now thinking about contributing to this map. And one of the first ones I put up here is get COVID info. Now, what is that? It essentially treats a URL, does a fetch, and returns a promise. Once this promise is fulfilled, or once you have a body from this being called, then I do various pass jobs. So in this particular one, I pass the Johns Hopkins CSV file just to check the date of the last entry. And this is what gives us the date that you see on the top right-hand corner as soon as you enter the website. And this is updated automatically using this. Another code snippet that I pulled out that I thought might be interesting is setting the markers. So essentially, this deals with the size of the red dots, the red circles, if you will. And I also have a little bit of HTML for the pop-up and how I want the pop-up to be designed, as well as the data such as the active cases, the number of this, and so forth. And then as you can see here, in order to set the marker, it's very simple. Simply just set the longitude and the latitude, so where on the map you want it to be placed, which I get from either the Johns Hopkins file or my override CSV file, and set the pop-up and add it to the map, which is created otherwise. So now the advantages and disadvantages of the technical stack that I showed. Advantages is that it's lightweight, really just focus on the front end a lot. And yeah, it's very simple for somebody to just jump in and get started because it's so lightweight. If somebody wanted to, for example, go through the entire code base, it's quite simple. It's really focused on front end. In terms of less overhead, I will say less technical overhead because I didn't have to, for example, spend time setting up, let's say, for example, a file-based database, design it, think about how I want to persist the data, how I want to read from it. I didn't have to deal with any of that. But there's kind of a paradox to that, and I will talk about that in the disadvantages. And then less responsibility because, as I said, this website is more or less or mainly a front end on Johns Hopkins data. Johns Hopkins has a team that is focused on making sure that the information is accurate, making sure that the information is correct. They may even go back sometimes and correct old data. And in this situation where I really just have a front end on their data, if they go back and make changes, I kind of get that for free, as opposed to if I was persisting the data, I would have to kind of do that whether programmatically or manually, check and verify this data. And it's very important in a case like this to have accurate data. And in terms of the disadvantages, one of the biggest ones and one of the ones why probably this map will move to a local database in general is heavy dependency. It's very heavily dependent on Johns Hopkins CSV file. If for some reason, I really hope this doesn't happen, but if for some reason they decide, you know what, we're going to pull the CSV file, we don't want it to be publicly accessible anymore, then the map will go down. So this is a very strong case for actually making the website have its own database. And increased complexity. This is why this is the one that I mentioned that's a bit of a paradox in that, yes, I mentioned that there's less technical overhead, but in some cases there's extra technical overhead. Why is that? Because it's essentially a front end on the Johns Hopkins data. Sometimes there were things that I wanted to manipulate that I had to write a function in a way that I had to make sure that every single time it passes through, or every single time I get information from Johns Hopkins, it gets the desired result, or it has a reliable result. And in some cases, I even had to put in extra code that I might not have to have done if I had my own database or if I was processing this information myself. Now a little bit about open source. To be honest, this was my first time being an open source maintainer on such a big project. It definitely came with some responsibilities, and I will get into that. Some of the things I learned for sure is the importance of structure. I had to think about how I'm going to structure the components, for example, in a way that if somebody wanted to jump on and help, it will be, really straightforward or make sense. And just backtracking a little bit, when I first decided to go open source with this, I really had hesitation in some situations because I was thinking, suppose somebody looks at the way that I do things and say, this is terrible, I would never do it like this. You really feel like you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your code out there. And so I did have, a bit of thoughts about that. But in the end, it's actually positive because it really makes me think about how I write code, especially if I'm not writing it just for myself. Also learn the importance of creating SEOs. This kind of helps people who want to contribute understand what issues you have with the website, understand sometimes in some cases where you're going with the website, and makes it a bit more open to contribution. Also realize the importance of openness, not just because I said, oh, this is an open source website means that people would just come clamoring to contribute. One thing I really found helpful was broadcasting live on Twitch and going through some of the code base, explaining, this is what is involved, this is what I do, this is where I see this going. And after that, I got one of the first pull requests. So a sense of openness as well really helps with the open source project. And also I realized that it takes time. It demands time of you to be a good maintainer, to take time to look through the pull requests, to really give thoughtful feedback and so forth. So these are some of the things that I learned. So this is the GitHub link. You can visit it right here. I can actually quickly show it. Right now, we're at 10 stars. Hooray. And here are some of the contributors. So like I said, I really understood or really saw the importance of structure. And I spent time, making sure that the README was clear. I even had some of the same code snippets that I share, just to make it as inviting and easy as possible for people to contribute. So that's it. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you very much for that talk. Must admit, I have some questions myself, but I want to open the floor to the audience, attendees, of course. So we're just going to wait a bit for those questions.
Sure. Let me know. Feel free to ask any questions.
We'll be looking out in the comments.
Okay.
So you did a couple of interesting things here that I find like I never even saw before. So to be clear, the John Hopkins data set, that's a Git repo, right?
Yes, so they have a CSV file or a comma separated value file on the GitHub, where they actually have the data that they put on their website. I think it's a little bit delayed, but they update it once per day. And they have all the cases, all the information for all the countries in the world. And then for the United States, they also have a bit more in-depth information because that's what they're focused on.
Wow. So, okay, before I continue, I'm seeing a question here.
Okay, sure. Okay, that's a really good question. I actually have never used functional components yet. There's a young lady that I follow on Twitter. Her name is Cassie. She's also very funny, Cassidy. So I recommend that you follow her if you're interested in React. And she gave a lot of training and so forth. The reason why I mention her is because I watch a few of her videos explaining functional components and why React really wants to move towards this. But for example, at work, at my job, we are still using mainly class-based components, and I still use class-based components. But from what I understand from what she explained, with the functional components, it will be really sticking a bit more to functional programming in general and this idea of, pure functions and not manipulating things as much. So, but I'm not an expert on functional components. I'm learning that myself. But thanks for the question.
Great. I'm seeing another question here.
What do you see as the future for your app? Hey, Maria. Thanks for asking that question. That's a very good question. And I got that question a lot, especially more and more as I started to share the map and share the fact that this is an open source project and I really want other Caribbean developers to contribute. I will say that my biggest gripe in general, and one of the reasons why I like programming a lot is that in the Caribbean, I feel like we have a shortage when it comes to information and even data. So I think we need to do more of gathering data, and we need to do more of turning this data into information, and information that's publicly accessible or publicly available, and not just to certain like domain specific fields. So just to give a random example, maybe lawyers have a portal that only they can log into because they have credentials from their job or so forth, and they could see this information, but I feel like it needs to be more open and more accessible. So I say all of that roundabout thing to say that for the app and for apps in general that I work on for the Caribbean, I really want the future to be the places or the areas where we don't have enough publicly accessible information. How can we, one, make it in a way that it's easy for people to enter information, or two, make it in a way that it's easy to present this information and easy for people to consume this information. So more accessibility is of data and of information is the future of this app.
Yeah, I really think you hit the nail on the head there, because that relates to my other question with the John Hopkins data set. They actually have that's really interesting that they have a GitHub repo. They actually using a developer tool, and they publish it in a CSV format. See, your app is just hitting that file, and whatever updates that they publish, you get it.
Exactly.
And that would have been a dream come true if we had something like that, especially in Trinidad. The way the military would publish data, they would take a picture of a document and and post that on social media.
That's one of my biggest gripes in general. You speak about taking a picture. For example, the health department, the Ministry of Health in St. Vincent, they were publishing, for example, Word documents as PDF files, taking a screenshot of this PDF files and the PDF file and then posting it to Facebook. And it doesn't make information more accessible. And I think that general, or one of the messages that I really want to send out is that as the Caribbean development community in general, maybe we could be the ones to try as much as possible to gather data and maybe do like Johns Hopkins did and post it on GitHub, or post it in a way that other developers can build on the information that we have access to.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I've seen some people do that, but it gets so difficult. It gets tiring every day to look at that image, retype it down. It'd be good if they were, on the other side, we could get a little formats that are just a little easier to work with. And that example you said about the government, I think that's exactly what our health ministry does as well. Picture of a PDF.
Definitely. I mean, I think maybe they also need maybe people on the instance of this, or maybe maybe we can all come together, write letters, or try to impress on information more accessible. Then us as developers could actually build more tools on top. I've said this before, but one of the international media is that we're not only dealing with a pandemic, but an infodemic. And it's funny because if you check, for example, some of the bigger nations' plans that they have for dealing with a pandemic, once it gets to a certain point, a big part of controlling the virus is also controlling the dissemination of information. Like, for example, I think it was the United States. They even have like a section on just how they're going to, or how they plan to disseminate information properly. And it's the same for us in the Caribbean, and nobody cares about our data more than us, and nobody cares about our information more than us. So if it's made available in a way that we could, as developers, work on it and put it out in different ways, whether a Twitter bot or Obika mentioned even this Telegram app, if we could make a lot more things open source and a lot more data open source, it would be really, really, really good.
Yeah, that's the dream. Another really interesting thing I saw in your presentation is that you did a Twitch sort of code review of your project. That's so interesting.
Yes.
What inspired that?
So, me personally, I love looking at Twitch streams. I kind of got a bit addicted to it during the lockdown, where I was just looking at people on Twitch, coding. I found it really interesting, especially if it's in something that I'm trying to learn, just to see. It's a bit different to watch a tutorial and see, like, okay, here's how you make a to-do app, as opposed to see somebody live on stream struggling or trying to figure out, or doing different searches on Google to figure out, oh, I need to add this or that. And also you get a bit into the thought process and you see how they think, and it inspires you to kind of explore different solutions in different ways. So after watching a lot of Twitch streams myself, I said, and also I got a request. It's twofold actually. I was watching a lot of Twitch and I got requests as well to do some kind of session or something, just sharing like how I made the map. And I said, maybe I should just do a Twitch stream myself. So I started a channel and I just decided, I shared the link on Twitter and I just said, anybody who wants to come, I'm just gonna go on stream, do a walkthrough of the code. If you have any questions, ask me any questions. And it was really, really a great experience, because not only, as I said, after that, I got the first pull request for the project. Not only that, but I also learned stuff and I also got tips from other developers who were in the stream. Like, for example, I wasn't using Lodash. I was doing some of the array manipulations myself, and somebody in the comments was just like, "Oh, but you should just use Lodash." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Why didn't I think of that?" It was kind of pair programming as well. So it
Yeah,
was really a good experience. I hope to do more Twitch streams in the future as well.
I'm definitely interested in that. So I've seen a question. Any tips you would give? Um, just how you
Yes.
get that audience?
Sorry.
Yeah, how you get that audience? But
Yeah.
yeah,
So in terms of tips, well, so you just asked a very interesting question. How do you get that audience? The thing about Twitch, I think you have to pull people from other platforms. So, for example, I was already interacting with a lot of developers on Twitter, so I just posted the Twitch link there, for example. But also with time and consistency, especially if you have a set schedule, then people start to show up. Another advice I would really say for live streaming code is that one thing you don't realize until you start live streaming yourself coding, that it's very, very different to sitting behind your desk and coding for work. It's completely different. You blank out, you forget things that you usually remember, or you second guess that you have to Google or look up certain things while you're on Twitch, because you think, oh, people might judge me that I have to look this thing routine.
mhm,
We
I can
always forget,
imagine.
we always
I
forget
can
those.
imagine.
Whereas on Twitch, you kind of feel like, oh man, should I hide this? But my advice is just like, be yourself, just go with the flow. And for a lot of people who watch development streams, they will actually want to see that. That's why they're there, to see all of it, and not some perfect, let's say, role of how a developer should work.
Okay. Right. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed that presentation. Glad to have you on this event. Um, right. Right. So next we will have our another speaker. I'm going to bring him right on. Hey, Evan. How you doing?
Good man. How you going, Nicholas?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Can you give us an introduction? Yourself?
Sure. A brief one. My name is Ewan Williams. I work at Teleo Systems. I've been there for quite a while now, 15, 16 years, which feels super long. But we've been having a lot of fun building applications that have been sometimes very popular, other times more focused on individual customers. And we continue to explore ways to provide digital enablement and digital services around the region and beyond.
Great. So can you tell us what this talk is going to be about?
Right. So it's called Agents of Teams. Agents of Teams. It's kind of a play on the fact that Agents of Shield came to an end this year. You know, I don't really refer to much of it in the presentation, but I found she was real good, so I wanted to have some fun with the title at least. But really it focuses on how we use Microsoft Teams at Telius, and specifically how I've been experimenting with the platform. It's a bunch of stories, not too much code, but I'm hoping that every one of the vignettes really are useful, and they encourage the rest of us to get into things like that.
Okay, great. So must admit, I haven't seen this entire presentation myself, so I'm really trusting you with this one. So without further ado,
It's gonna be perfect.
let's go.
Hi, my name is Ewan Williams. I'm the Chief Software Engineer at Telius Systems, and this is my presentation, Agents of Teams. At Telius, we use Microsoft Teams pretty extensively, and here are some of the key features of Teams. From chat, voice, video, and of course plain text to almost anywhere access. It really is a very solid part of how we work today. Teams has this thing where you have your companies grouped into teams, and the teams can be maybe composed of channels, and those channels are really good to help you do the things listed underneath in terms of consolidation and spotlighting of issues and resources in the company. I like as well we were always moving away from too much chattiness in email into other platforms, and Teams has become a really good place for that. Of course, a home for a lot of content, so it's easy to find things, easy to figure out where things could be and that kind of stuff. And as well, you can add a number of applications and extensibility points to it, which is why I found it to be so attractive and why I did some of the innovations you'll see in this talk. So Teams, of course, is used across the organization, as you see from these groups here. This is just an example of some of the groups, from HR to IT to engineering and project management. So to start us off, I want to talk about TFW. TFW stands here in this context for time for work. If you've been following some of my previous chatbot development, you know I would have used TFW for time for water. I probably needed some more innovation here, but it felt good and it worked. Why it exists is because my usage pattern for Teams involves essentially calling anybody who's set to green, meaning as long as their status is set to available, I just just make a Teams call, reach out to them. But sometimes, even though it's set to green, they're not actually in office that day. They may have just logged on to check something out, or they may have responded to a message they wanted to, but they're not in office. And sometimes it's good to know whether they are not, to know how to bother them or not, you know what I mean? So it's easy to do. Just log into our HR app, go to the calendar and scroll, and you're good to go. However, sometimes it feels that that's breaking your flow. You're already near to Teams, why not just send a message there? Which is how this came about. So I sent sometimes a one-word message out, and the chatbot knows that means who's out today, and sends back a reply like this, telling me who's out, how long they're out for, and maybe why they're out. Pretty straightforward, and similar approaches to what I've used in the past in terms of deliver a message to the bot and then get a reply really quickly that's focused and functional. But for some reason, when I was doing this, it reminded me of daily reports. I kind of felt, oh, you know what, beyond just asking who's out, what about using this to track what's going on with your days? And that comes from when we started doing daily reports, it turned out to be a really good way for me to contemplate my days. Now, daily reports, not these kinds of reports. We're not they weren't meant to be frustrating, although some were. And that time led me to putting this into my calendar as a way to help me contemplate the day. What value did he add today? Could be seen by some to be kind of heavy, or maybe not. Just do a quick scan. And because of that relationship, I was thinking how to extend time for work, how to add some more to it. And that led me to discovering this bit of research that Microsoft had done, like many other large companies during COVID, on how their employees who may have been new to the remote workspace, as well as the other challenges around work-life balance and working home with your kids. So this was an extension developed to help corral that information and find insights from it if possible. But they didn't just put out the research, they actually shared the code to implement this messaging extension in your own team's environment, which is what we did. Now, this is how it structured, is the architecture of it. And essentially by providing the code in GitHub and providing deployment templates that describe the fact the application needs these resources is a really good way to get up and running. And this architecture diagram that came from that same repo helps kind of let you see how the information is flowing and how the resources are used, from the bot framework to the logic app used for notification to the storage, the Azure storage table. All that stuff is a nice way to consider how to put the resources together. So I was glad for that. And so Reflect receives your team messages or pushes messages out to you, and via web app, it would pass it on both to the from the bots framework and into storage that can be used for greater insights later on. And it presents questions like this, really. How are you feeling about today's project, or how is work-life balance? And I was glad that it was so focused on that thing, and my chatbot, Time for Work, is focused on simply saying who's in or out based on the calendar that my HR system used. So I put them together, but there was a lot of learning from simply writing the extension in Teams to writing the chatbot in Teams, which is Time for Work, discovering the messaging extension, and just doing more work in extensions, figuring out how messaging extensions work. And the next, I think, key learning here for me was skills, that there's a thing called bot framework skills. So you can have chatbot A, Time for Work, chatbot B, Reflect, and they can talk to each other without having to put the code from chatbot A into chatbot B, which was beneficial for me because I didn't need to do a lot of rework to get these two to communicate. And this is what it looks like. So this is the Reflect chatbot who runs the Reflect messaging extension, but it can handle questions meant for Time for Work because it simply passes them on via the bot framework skills functionality. And it also delivers on what we wanted to deliver in terms of talking about how was work, what's the work-life balance like, and questions like that. It can field via this interface. So you have the two bots talking to each other. And of course, I was very interested in how I could get that contemplative question represented inside of the Reflect extension. And it did really well. So those three learnings were really interesting for me, especially bots talking to each other. That feels like a good way to contemplate this thing of agents of teams. The bots are working together to accomplish some goal. So moving on from agents of teams with Time for Work and Reflect, and even their interaction as skills, let's talk about another bot, Eric. So Eric is the enterprise exercise bot. Just if we were to step back before COVID, before lockdown, any given day you walk through Telios, you could have seen a whiteboard with a log of people's push-up statistics. You could have seen someone doing push-ups or doing rolls on the rolly thing. I'm sorry, I don't remember what it's called, the rolly thing. But we were always trying to encourage each other to be physically fit. Either there'll be people who do a lot of running or cycling, a lot of high intensity activity. So you had that lead up to COVID, and even leading up to COVID, we were going through another one of those cycles, and then boom, lockdown hits. Gian Bell, he's one of our administrators at Telios, built a Power App solution to help us remember, stay physically fit by gamifying the whole approach and encouraging us to share, log our workouts and share how much we've been doing. And as it turns out, every week, because of his Power App, we were able to kind of follow each other in the leaderboard. And it turned out to be a really good way to keep us encouraged and keep us engaged. That particular one, Gian did share on the Telios CodeJam website on the YouTube page, so you could actually see him talking about it in some detail. But that was just version one of it. He did another version that focused on an interesting Star Trek meme. So we are in the enterprise of Telios, but we're also in this enterprise where we are escalating in terms of skill and level. So in his second Power App, you might have started off like an ensign, which is a very low ranked, not really low, but a lower ranked individual on the ship. But by working out frequently and by engaging each other and having variety, you could have gone up to commander or lieutenant commander. Not to make it militaristic, but to just demonstrate continual activity, continual fitness, even while we're separated, might have really good benefit for us and will have really good benefit. While using it, I always felt, I wish I could enter my information more easily, more quickly. So I thought, gee, let me make this chatbot. And as it turns out, when I reached out to the chatbot, there was a hackathon that was coming on, one of those Facebook hackathons. So we tried our hand at entering this version of the Power App solution Gian had built into that hackathon. All we got was a school swag. But the bug had bit, and I wanted this bot to live for real in Teams. And so we built it out so that it could talk to his Power App via an API call using bot framework facilities like adaptive cards and adaptive dialogues, and also Azure functions, so that you could register your workouts. Either if you look at the screen, either via that step-by-step add workout and planks, then number of time and the body weight, or, and this is how I prefer to use it, you could essentially group your work. So look at this video. Let me just show you how it would flow. You have to register, and there's a lot of learning taking place here, because at first, because it was an internal application, there's a high degree of trust. We didn't really bother to go through a lot of authentication. So it's simply, if you tell me you're Erwin and you're going to log as Erwin, and you take it as such. We will change that later on, but for now, it was simple authentication. This is at the chatbot level, not for Gion's Power App as a regular Power App. But here you can see I'm logging workouts, I'm logging reps, and the way I used, I wanted to use the bot wasn't so line 1, line 2, line 3. I wanted to push everything into one update. So you can see here, after all that workout, I just log all the reps in one message. So I wanted my bot to parse that and get that to where it needed to go, which was where the customization came in, which is why it turned out to be, to me, a useful way to consider the solution. So once it was sent up, it would go first across to the Power App, and you would see it talks about the level I'm at because of the workouts that we've been doing, and it captured each workout so it could be properly allocated. But not just in terms of getting there. You notice at the earlier point of the video, it let you enter a Strava authentication token. That's so that it would update the Power App and let my colleagues at Telios see, but my friends on Strava, who I also wanted to see this work, they could get the updates as well. So that this one bot is talking to both the Power App that Gian created, as well as Strava, and letting all the people I want to check out this activity easily check it out. So that's Eric, the enterprise exercise bot. So we had, I think, fun trying to get through the hackathon, but also just knowing where this can go. There's still a bit of work to do on it, but I'm hoping we can release it to at least the wider Telios community in the first instance, just to see how it works, see what value it adds. Already in talking to my colleagues and talking to my friends at work, I've been getting good ideas on how it should be extended. So that is That's always hopeful. So this is Eric, the enterprise exercise bot. Now, let's talk about Eric. Eric Air IQ A, Eric A. All right, let's see what this is. So it's really to do with air quality. And in Trinidad, I would take on air quality because, of course, relatives would have challenges with asthma or whatever. But this year in particular, it seemed to take a jump. The skies were legit dark for a long period of time, I think because of the Sahara Desert. And coinciding with that, Sahara dust, coinciding with that, soon after either the EMA or Ministry of Planning put out this website that would show information about air quality at Port of Spain, Point Lisas, and Signal Hill, Tobago. So they did that, and I noted it. From the time I noted it, I thought, that's cool. And then I saw this statement that they were looking to put out a mobile app to track air quality, and I thought, maybe not an app. Maybe you could do something else, like a chatbot. So this tweet made me more curious about what could be done. And I thought, all right, let's roll out a chatbot that simply provides information about air quality. It's a simple query, maybe. And that's what I did. But it was with some challenges because the Teams part of things, to me, was straightforward. I did it in a relatively short space of time. But I had to essentially re-architect the solution, but not just re-architect it, find out how it's done for Google Actions. And why did I want to do for Google Actions? I had it working for Teams fine, but I really wanted to be able to use my Google Home to say, hey, ask the Air Index, the Air IQ agent, what's going on with air in Port of Spain, for example. And that's what my goal was. As it turned out, because I had so much experience with Teams, I kept trying to get Teams and Azure, I kept trying to get the least amount of work done possible to get the Google Assistant to work. And for the most part, I didn't. I struggled for quite a while, and I had to kind of settle for the Teams version that was okay. I liked it. I like that. If you were to run this video, for example, just like with Time for Work, you send out, you get a good response. You send quality here, and there were a number of other kinds of messages you could send, but quality will cause this bot to go check for the current air quality index and come back with it for the 3 localities in Trinidad. You can see here it says the air quality index in Port of Spain is 124, which could be troublesome for some. So it's already good information. And it also lets you use the link provided to go to the actual air quality site hosted by, I think, by the EMA, so that you could get more insight into what's going on with air quality. So I was glad for this. And I thought, all right, cool. But I really wanted to be able to wake up in the morning and say, hey, Google, ask the air quality agent what's going on. So I kept kind of knocking on that door. And after a lot of trial and error, because I guess I'm not familiar with it, it took a while to understand the best ways to do it and not simply try to push everything across to the work I'd done before and get a response back. I eventually got it to this point, which is a minimal point, but at least it got me moving forward. And I'm looking forward
to getting the test version of Air IQ Agent. Hello, area. The air quality index in Port of Spain, Trinidad is 124. Check your device for more info.
So this is a really simple interaction. Where there was silence between it and me is when I actually said Port of Spain, and it responded to it and did the check for Port of Spain and noticed the similar values because I did the tests around similar times. That kind of thing I like a lot. I like the ease of this, and this is done on my phone, so I have Google Assistant on my phone as well. Pick your phone up. What's the air quality index? As opposed to having an app written, having an app provision somewhere. I tend to make the argument chatbots can be very, very useful to get to the last mile of a lot of functionality. There's already a website. I had to build my own API. I think Nicholas Mendes had asked some Caribbean developers a little while ago about things like scraping. And unfortunately, for services like this, if there are no official APIs, that tends to be only recourse. So this pulls the information from that site and displays it now here both in Google and in Teams, which I'm very happy to see. So let's take a turn for something completely different. Completely different. So mostly chatbots I've spent time writing involved taking text and doing things with it, querying a service, parsing it, using natural language understanding, even taking other kinds of content like images and parsing it or running it through machine learning, stuff like that. So yes, take content and in a very discrete way, work with it. I've not done a lot of audio and video stuff with chatbots, and yet you can. And I had this idea to interact with one of the streams. So it sent me down a funny trail, down a hill really, to tumble and tumble, but eventually discover some interesting stuff or learn some interesting stuff. So this agent, I call Mood because I could not think of a better name, and I'm sorry, but I think it's still pretty cool. Here's what it does. Here's what happened. I had this idea, so I'm digging around to see how to get the idea done and end up inside of this GitHub repo that talks about how to access the media streams of a call. And I then thought, this would be cool. This bot would be cool. So this mood bot tries to let you express your mood directly into the audio streams of a meeting. Just a thing I thought would be kind of cool. I don't know that it's super useful, but maybe it could be. So here's how it works. So you'll notice here that a join message is sent to the bot with a URL to a Teams meeting. This will cause another virtual agent to join that meeting. So this bot is at the front door to that agent. So when it joins the meeting, it sends back a meeting ID. And now I turn up a turntable. And for that meeting, I can express these ideas via audio. So that's playing in the meeting across the meeting channels without anyone having to share their audio from their machine directly. So at first I sent some waves, then to express a bit of frustration, I sent the classic scream. And my friend Ikechi is a musician, a producer, and he produced this really cool track. I like that it represents a particular point in meeting. We get in somewhere. And then Derek Hack had a post I saw on Facebook that I thought was pretty cool. You'll see it in a little while, but this represents a response to that, to the query his post posed. This is a music he plays to get someone off the stage for too long. Stop it now. So this bot, to be clear, this bot doesn't play any music. This bot simply tells another bot, join a Teams call, access the audio stream of the call, and send music down to the call based on command, based on the music I select. I'd never done that before, and I was glad to see how it was laid out and how you had to think about it. So the examples in the repo utilize Azure Service Fabric, which is one way to arrange many applications that need to run in concert. You could do it with containers today, or an array of virtual machines. So this was it's a kind of development I am curious about and try to get some experience with, even though a lot of clients tend to simply want a website to do something and do it quickly. So that was pretty cool. And this post is the one I saw that made me smile a bit, because if you look at the response, I have something for this hack. And here it is. It's a bot that can let you play rap of music inside of a call to tell someone, hey, easy up now, we get it, time to go. So those were the bots that represented my agents of teams. I had a couple more ideas that are still baking. So maybe in the future we could have some more chats about it. And I like that this particular set of considerations is driving me deeper and deeper to understand things about virtual agents and accessing audio streams and video streams to do cool things in the future. So I think that's it for me. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the people organizing this. I'm always glad to hear from Nicholas Mendez and the other people in the Google developer community, as well as the encouraging others to bring their stories, bring what they've seen, what they've understood, and even ask questions as well. Also like to shout out the Caribbean developer community. I think it's continuing to build and continue to grow, and I think it's going to go from strength to strength. I'm glad to be here. I am the Chief Software Engineer at Telios Systems. Telios has a bunch of developers who I want to say big up to as well. They are continuing to help us discover new ways to consider things, to consider solutions, and do it in a way that is fun and exciting. I look forward to working continuously with them to build cool things, even though there are challenges and challenging times like the COVID season 2 we're in, really. So cheers, everyone. Stay safe.
Okay, it's another great presentation from Erin. Erin, are you still there to come back on?
Yeah, man, I'm here.
All right, great. So we open into questions, but wow, there was so much technologies. I lost count in those slates of stories. How do you manage?
A lot of missed sleep at times, to be honest, because it's not quite my day job to be writing a lot of code. I don't really write code during the day these days, or anymore, to be fair. So most of the code I write tends to be at night. I think of it like this: either you're playing Halo or you're writing a chatbot. That's how I shake it down. In my free time, I might write some code to relax. Just check out something at a good time.
Wow. So I like, because you came last. I think every talk for GDG for Spain, you had a chatbot, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I like how you're promoting for the conversational UI, because I think there's a lot that could be done there.
I think it's so close to touching the future, in the sense that if you all grew up watching shows like Star Trek and any show that had a computer who was talking back to you, who was able to respond, and computer open the door, or who's the enemy approaching, and it would be a disembodied voice but rich with knowledge and insight. And we're at that today. You could find out all kinds of stuff by just talking to a virtual assistant, or talking to an Alexa, or talking to your phone. So to me, being able to create those experiences is very exciting. It continues to give me a sense of wonder of what we could do next.
Yeah. What do you think? Because in the event of smartwatches and even Bluetooth, I guess Bluetooth headsets, what do you think would be the first, the most common touch point for
I had my first smartwatch was a Galaxy Watch, and I spared no time impressing my friends by having complete phone calls on the watch. I think Apple's investment, if you look at the Apple presentations this year and the Apple Watch and what they've been saying about it, I think the watch will continue to be a place, a device like that, a wearable like that, where you don't have to look around. You have to change what you're doing to engage it. I think a watch and maybe smart glasses might be some of the very prevalent devices in the future, meaning you don't need to have a phone in your face and still be able to interact with the virtual world.
Great, great. So, how would you compare? So you mentioned how that's like two SDKs, right? That you did the conversation UI with the Teams and the Google. I guess that's Google Assistant or the Google
Google Actions SDK.
Action, right? So how do they compare in terms of developer experience?
All right. So you mentioned I've presented chatbots built typically with the Microsoft Bot Framework for a number of years now. So I think it wouldn't be fair for me to make a comparison between that experience and Google simply because I've not really dived that deeply into Google. I think both can have frustrations, but once you understand, and this is in general, I think for these larger platforms and environments where the teams of developers building SDKs, it's important to try to get into their mind because I feel like there's a conversation we're having as application developers with platform developers. So I have I know a number of persons who are either working in Microsoft or out of Microsoft on Bot Framework, and that helps with getting things along, figuring things out. I know much fewer on the Google side. As I begin to understand that, it helps with the conversation, and it doesn't become, for me, it's the revelation for me in this particular experience wasn't that again what felt easier. It felt easy to me because I know why that's happening. I need to do this with Google Actions. I cannot stop and just start from scratch and build my way up. So I think right now I'm looking forward to conversations with both teams, which is what it feels like I'm doing. I'm just talking to guys about how they see the world in terms of their platform.
Great, great. So I just realized that I always will do these events and introduce everyone but myself.
Right.
So I think I'll take that opportunity now for the attendees who probably don't know my face. I am Nicholas Mendez, one of the organizers for GDG Port of Spain. So that's the Google Developer Group native to Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this event that you're currently watching now is GDG Caribbean. So it's a collaboration from GDGs from all over the Caribbean. We have GDG Kingston from Jamaica, GDG Georgetown from Guyana. We have GDG Port-au-Prince from Haiti, and GDG Santo Domingo from the Dominican Republic. Okay. I really hope I didn't forget anybody. I think that's all of us. So I'm not seeing any other questions from chat, but thanks again so much, Ewan, for bringing such a entertaining and technical talk to the event. Any last things you want to say?
Anybody else building chatbots out there? Let's talk. Let's do one of these, maybe a conference like this, focus on Caribbean challenges that we're using bots to solve. I would love to extend that. I see Shannon Clark mentioned a Telegram bot. Yeah, Shannon, build it out. I'd love to collaborate some more, maybe have a few of these kinds of meetups or unmeetups and innovate together. Good job again, team.
Great. Thanks again, Ewan.
Yeah.
Remember, attendees, we have a website, DevFestCarib.web.app, and there you can get the agenda and you get the social media links of all the speakers for our event. Okay. So thanks, Ewan. I'm going to bring on our next speaker. Hi, Lisa.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Tom. Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
This is the first time. This is the first time we're talking as well, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I'm in the UK, so it's pretty late. It's nearly 9 o'clock.
Oh, right. Okay, so thanks for joining us despite the time zone difference. Do you want to give an introduction? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm actually a lead data analytics manager. I've worked in the data field for more than 15 years, and I manage ICs and also managers. So one of the key things that I wanted to highlight was the lack of managers that sit within data. And given now that we've kind of moved to more of a remote working scenario, there's going to be a lot more opportunities that people that are based in the Caribbean or anywhere else in the world to apply for roles. So my talk is basically going to cover how you go about moving from IC, an individual contributor, if you're not sure what that is, to becoming a manager. Cool.
Oh, great. So can you, we have a little time and we're a little early ahead of time. So can you give us some insights in terms of what are those two roles? Or maybe without the,
Yeah, sure. So like, as I said, I've worked in data for over 15 years and so forth. So for me, I originally started off as a developer. So I've coded in multiple languages, which I do kind of briefly mention. So with an individual contributor, the expectation is that you are, you could be a data engineer, it could be a data scientist, it could be a software engineer. And then what tends to happen is that role can move into becoming a lead, or you can become a senior. So when you move into a manager role, so you can get manager roles which are not people managers, and then you get the people manager role. And the clear distinction between that type of manager is that when you're a people manager, you have the ability to hire people, but at the same time you also fire people. So that's where one of the key differences are. But it's more also about that you're there to drive other people to deliver and offer guidance, support, coach and mentor those individuals. So it's a really kind of it's a different way of working, and definitely I enjoy mentoring other individuals. I like to help people on their career paths.
Okay, great. So I guess we can get into that presentation now. So without further ado, let me add it to the stream. And this is a talk from Lisa, Level Up, from IC Data Engineer to Data Manager.
Today I'm going to be talking to a data manager. So first off, I'm going to introduce myself. So my name is Lisa Lane. I was born in London. My parents are from Trinidad and Tobago. I started to code when I was actually 10 years old. This was by being introduced into a home computer. At the time was a Commodore 64. Some of you may never have heard of it, but it allowed me to actually start coding. So I started coding with BASIC, and essentially what I programmed at the time was a skiing game. And that was my first, I would say, first insight into coding. And my main driver was that I'm one of 4 girls, and I built this game, and I built some cheats into it. So I kept beating my older sister, which she never figured out until obviously I've told her years later. So that was my first start on my journey into tech, which led me to doing a computer science degree later on. And that was followed up by a master's in business intelligence and analytics. So today, as I said, I've worked with data for 15 years. I've programmed in multiple languages. You know, the list is endless. So, you know, some of those languages were like, I've programmed with C, Pascal, COBOL. I've Java, JavaScript, Python, multiple databases I've had exposure to, and developed both standard SQL and advanced SQL. Used Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, Redshift, various cloud solutions. You're talking about GCP, AWS, Azure, vendor business intelligence tools, SAP data, business objects, Tableau, Power BI. It's varied. So I've had exposure, a wide exposure to, I would say, the data analytics landscape. That's led me to where I'm today, where I'm the lead data and analytics manager working at Eurostar, where I manage both individual contributors and managers. Alongside that, I also do a lot of volunteering. I volunteer with an organisation called anitaB.org. It is a women in technology organisation, non-profit, based in the US. I am a community leader with the London chapter. I am actually the point of contact, so I'm the main chapter lead, I would say. Also sit on the mid-career committee, which is part of the membership platform. I'm the co-chair for that currently. Also, I've done public speaking. I've spoken around things to do with data analytics, but also I speak about diversity, equity and inclusion. I also mentor both females and males. And to round that off, how I got really my key start into becoming onto the manager path was that I was a founding director of a local credit union, where I served as on the executive board as a non-executive director, holding the post of general secretary, which was then followed by being the compliance officer. So that's a bit of insight into me. So having that insight, I will kind of give you some of the key skills that I, as a hiring manager, look for individuals that I'm looking to hire as a manager. So the key attributes that what hiring managers look for, also, and how to develop these skills. So I'm going to start off with what are the skills needed, and I've highlighted 6 key skills here, but you may see other places where they've got more skills highlight, but I think these are the key 6 that I will focus on. The first being communication, right? So this is really key to being a leader, is to have good communication skills. Having the ability to successful relationships is integral. So it's really important that you understand how to build relationships, how to nurture relationships. This is delivered through mastering all forms of communications, being written, verbal, and key really is listening skills. Having that ability to listen is the number 1 skill of being a manager. The next one I believe is important is delegation. As a manager, you juggle multiple responsibilities, such as managing your own workload, attending meetings, preparing reports, feedback, managing others. So you really need to learn how to delegate. And as a leader, identifying individuals in your team that have the skills you may not necessarily have, but you have an understanding of, is key. So as a team manager, you always have objectives set that flow from the corporate goals, and understanding that the need of the goals to be delivered outweigh the need for you to be able to try to do everything. So it's really important that you delegate in order that you achieve your team objectives. The third point I would emphasize that's important is the ability to be strategic, have a good skill for planning, strategic thinking of the bigger picture. So, focus on tasks and responsibilities, just not for today, but also plan for the future. This is key to understanding company goals and how they fit into what you're delivering and what your team can deliver. The fourth skill that I think is really important is problem solving. That is having the ability to focus on the detail. So having the ability to remain calm by focusing on the detail of a problem, thinking about the solution, being creative, have creative thinking, lean on individuals in your team. So this is something that can be discussed as a focal point. And key is having the ability to weigh up the pros and cons to make an informed decision. This does flow into the next point as well, having commercial awareness. So in a leadership level position, you need to understand the business. That is a high priority for any manager. Understand what business you're working in, what you're trying to deliver, what the company goals. Being aware of the organisation's missions and aims. Understand the sector that your organisation or company exists in. Think about the political and economical issues that may affect the business, and know your competition. That is really key, to understand who else is in the same market as you. And finally, mentoring. So I've got mentoring, but it's really about mentoring and coaching your direct reports, your team. This can be done through training, advising them, helping them to build their skills, helping to be more confident, letting them think outside of the box, which will ultimately help their career progression. So that is one of the key things in a manager. So people talk about empathy and emotional intelligence. These are the key things that you should focus on. So how do you develop these skills? Which is a good question, and that's the next thing we'll talk about. So as you saw earlier, one of the things that was instrumental in me moving from an individual contributor to manager was volunteering. So through volunteering, I was able to gain a lot of the skills that I've talked about. So, a good example is event planning. If you're volunteering, you learn about how to plan an event, about sourcing speakers, engaging. So you build your confidence through networking, your communication skills improve. Chairing meetings, for instance, understanding the importance of timekeeping and so forth. And volunteering is a really good opportunity to harness on those skills that you may already have, or to learn new skills. Think about writing about the projects that you've worked on, developing a blog. These things are seen and are read, and they will help to build and your profile and your personal branding. Think about joining networking groups, such as the one we're on today. It's really important because this will help you build those networks, will help you drive towards getting to the next goal, because you never know the opportunity that that person may give to you, but also it allows you to have that peer mentoring opportunity, not other people questions about specific areas of being a manager, or specific areas to specialize in the area that you're working. Think about becoming a mentor also. Mentoring is a really good opportunity. That mentoring is a two-way street, in that you can mentor somebody that is more experienced than you, but you've got more experience in a different specific area. But also, it's good to help build your confidence and grow on your networking, because though sometimes mentoring gives you opportunities that you would never have been aware of. And finally, I would say, think about the market trends, keep up what's going on. Google things, be aware of the data landscape, because it's changed and it changes constantly on a daily basis. So follow things that are of interest to you, and also look at the research companies. I've given you some examples here, Gartner and Forrester, but there's many out there. So make sure that you do those things to help you to get to the next level. So that's the end of my presentation. Hopefully that has given you some insight into how to move and how to prepare yourself to move from an IC to a manager. So if you want to contact me, you can do that through Twitter, or you can contact me through LinkedIn. If you do contact me through LinkedIn, please put a message in there where you've seen me or how I may be able to help you. If any advice that you require, I'm always happy to help you where I can. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the talks and goodbye.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi.
Thank you for our first lightning talk. So just for the attendees, the lightning talk is a format of talk which is a little shorter than the other sessions. So Lisa would have been our first lightning talk for the event.
Okay, cool. Right. So I do apologize that my voice is really low on that.
That's no problem. We would republish it, and we could see we could up the volume. Okay.
Cool.
So we open the floor to questions. We have a little time. But one thing I would like to talk about while we wait for those questions is I think you really touched on something that I know you were specific to data manager, and but some of those points I think applies to many fields, especially that mentorship point.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that I don't just mentor people that work in the same era as me. So I'm very much an advocate of there's transferable skills. So having the conversations with different individuals definitely helps you grow. I'll be honest with you, I've been so fortunate to have met different people along the way. So I'll give you an interesting story about myself. So I worked in the data arena, but then I wasn't sure of what kind of area I really wanted to work. So I got introduced to doing reporting using business intelligence tool, SAP Business Objects. It was a really old legacy tool, but still in use. And then I remember looking on the SAP user group and seeing Miko Yuck. I'm sure if you know the data stuff, you will be familiar with her. And I remember seeing her on there and I was like, oh my God, it's a woman. And then secondly, oh my God, it's a black woman. And and I was fortunate to meet her because I remember when she first started doing, she's now a company called BI Brains. She was doing the BI template, which led to her writing the book and so forth. So I met her back in 2011. It could have been even earlier. And that was one of the things that was instrumental for me deciding, do you know what, I'm going to be a manager now. I've decided this is the area I'm going to stay in. And having, the conversations with her, and I've kept in contact with her over the years, and it's just been a really good kind of like thing to drive me to get to the next level. In that you've got informal mentors, so which is really important, and having other individuals that you can talk to. So that's one of the things I definitely learned.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that relates to your networking point as well. When you really put yourself out there.
Definitely. Because I think one of the things that I've been really fortunate because I've been to you saw that picture at the end. I've been to the Growth Hopper celebration twice. I've spoken there twice. The second time, 2019, I moderated, and I went in 2018 because I was actually a leader at that point with the London chapter, and they invited us to go out there. I met some other leaders who've all become my best friends now. But we're all at different levels, do different things. It's just given me a wider kind of network of individuals. I've met some great people that have written books as well. You just can't. It helps drive you, and having conversations with different people at different levels, you can learn from them, and that's one of the key things I've learned. Definitely, the volunteering is helped, because one of the things that I always question is that when I get resumes, we say CVs in the UK, I hardly ever see women applying for roles in this area. So, first off, I am a technical manager, although do hands-on development on a day-to-day basis. That is my background, and I'm still astonished that when I put out adverts for roles, women don't apply. So that I am kind of biased towards that. I'll be honest with you, but at the same time, I want to see people not just go to the lead roles or senior roles. I want them to have the manager role in the titles and have that opportunity. Yeah. That's more strategic. You're the one that gets to make the budgetary decisions, which is a huge difference when you're the lead, developer or the senior developer. You're there to be, the expert to help the juniors, whoever, but you don't have any say in the strategic planning of what you're delivering.
Yeah, I would say diversity and inclusion is very important for us, and we do try to, fill out, and that's, and try to get a good distribution and mix of things, and that's why we're so happy, to have you here, because what I think really helps is for people to see, themselves, to see representation across the board.
Yeah, which is, and for me, because as I said, my parents came from Trinidad and Tobago, and literally Trinidad and Tobago, not just one island. And I have a lot of family, so I would say that I have a lot of family there. And I think the thing that I'm disappointed with is that I'm not seeing, one of the things I don't see enough people, this is male and females, applying for the scholarships to attend the Grasshopper celebration. It is it's huge. You get a lot of, I would say, undergraduates going there, and they acquire jobs through this organisation. And there's other scholarships that are available as well for underrepresented individuals. And it is about, I can see Janika's put representation. It is about representation, and it's really important for people to see that there's different levels you can get to. I think one of the problems that we have, definitely from the Caribbean perspective, is that you don't see a lot of Caribbean women outside of the Caribbean out there being known. I'll be honest with you. Whereas there is a lot of us that work in different areas of tech. Obviously, for me, I'm more familiar with the data arena, but I know a lot of great software engineers, but they haven't moved to being the manager role. They're still stuck at the lead role or the senior role, and it's question. And that's the things I like to question. But at the same time, I think definitely in the Caribbean, it's really important that the focus of the digital side is seen as being something that people need to aspire to, because the nature of the work that's going to be available has changed forever. And I think that's really important, that people see that technology needs to be harnessed and maintained by people that are actually born in the Caribbean. Yes, I can claim fame, but I wasn't born in the Caribbean. But yes, for me, that's one of the things that drives me, because I've got a lot of family there. I've got younger cousins, and it's like encouraging them to understand that they're the future and they need to take control of it, because otherwise you're in a situation where you get a lot of, I would say, American, European companies coming over and taking control of driving your digital landscape.
Yeah, that's another thing that's important for us in increasing the visibility of Caribbean born and Caribbean affiliated or Caribbean descendant, technical competency, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really important as well that it's great when you've got the localized Caribbean-based conferences, but you need to see these same individuals putting themselves forward for the international conferences, because the nature of conferences will change for the future, in that even though we may get to a point where we do in person, they will all look to do an offering where it's virtual at the same time. And I think this is the time for people to stand up and to be seen. I think Jamaica is doing so much more than a lot of the other Caribbean islands, which is really important. And I think that's the driver that will drive everybody else to unite as a Caribbean tech. I kind of like it, it's not a Silicon Valley, but I wouldn't call it, because I don't want to refer to that, but a Caribbean tech hub. Which, yeah, because there's really bright and individuals that, if they're given the opportunity, they develop some great products.
Yeah, I have to admit too. I think we should really do a lot to get that international visibility as well. But what I find, looking for speakers, there's some speakers who you'd see in this event. I actually kind of, they take a little coaxing. Like I kind of needed to try to persuade them to say it's not too much. You could just do a 5-minute recording. We don't need to see your face, because I really want to bring them to the forefront. And I've seen a sort of shyness. I think we need to, get past that.
Yeah, and I think that once people do start doing, continuous talks, and they're not too long, because the 15, lightning talks are much, even though they seem that they're easier to do, then the less time you have to talk, sometimes it's harder, but it does discipline you. But it's a good start. So it may be that it's not so formal, but just doing it, like, even if it's like 30 people that turn up on like a Zoom call or something like that, or Google Meet, then it's like an informal kind of thing where you can get people to talk about something for 5 minutes and have it like that, so they start getting used to having kind of like a forum and talking on camera, and offering that kind of opportunity for people to ask some questions specifically about what they're doing, and that might be a good way to do it. But I do hear you. I think a lot of people shy away from that, and it just comes across that there isn't talent to talk, but there is talent to talk, but people feel obliged that they don't want to talk, they don't want to put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm. And well, that's why I think an event like DevFest is good, because we try to make it accessible, right? Different levels. You want to do something simple, low commitment. We're gonna do something even more, so people can kind of get that practice.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really good that that you're doing this, and I think the more you do this, the better it will come. And it's about networking, and we're all part of different networks, and it's working together. Because one of the things I'm adamant about is encouraging more. Because again, I'm going to go back women, encouraging more women from the Caribbean to talk on the platform that I'm one of the community leaders with. Because we have a lot of, we've got a lot of individuals that attend the conference and attend some of the different sessions that happen now all online. So, which I think is really important.
Great. Yep. So, thank you so much for starting the discussion about diversity and inclusion. And we're actually going to have a panel talk in the next couple of days, or the other days, that's more centered around this conversation. I think we are just about to wrap it up there. So thank you for closing.
Thank you. Sorry, I said thank you. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you for helping us close. Thank you for your talk, Lisa. So I'm just gonna wrap things up for now.
Okay, cool. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your sessions over the next couple of days.
Okay, thank you. Same to you.
Okay, bye. Good night.
Okay, so right, so that brings us to the end of day one. I hope the sessions were interesting and fun, and we have much more. We have 2 more days actually full of content for y'all. So I hope to see y'all there. Just keep an eye out on the event platform. So if you go to our website, devfestcaribbean.web.app, and you click on the buy ticket link, it will get you to the event platform, and that is where the main channel will use to communicate you the links to the next streams, because there are many destinations depending from what chapter you're coming from. So you want to make sure and communicate those links to you. Okay, so that's it for today, and I will see you tomorrow.